The dusty town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where secrets traveled faster than stagecoaches and reputations were built or destroyed over whiskey and whispers. Clay Maddox, the tall, broad-shouldered rancher with a smirk that could charm thunder out of clouds, had always been the kind of man people watched when he walked into a room. He had money, land, and the kind of confidence that made women flutter and men grit their teeth. One evening at the saloon, when laughter and liquor ran wild, a group of ranch hands teased him, saying he could have any woman he wanted except the quiet, plain one who worked at the dressmaker's shop, the one named Ella Grace. She was sweet, simple, and always wore that same faded blue dress with lace at the collar. But you wouldn't marry that one, Maddox, one of them joked, slamming his glass down. Clay laughed, leaned back in his chair, and said with a grin that carried both arrogance and danger, "Name your stakes, boys. I'll marry her by next month, and you'll all eat your words." They shook on it, half drunk and full of foolish pride, never realizing that bets made in jest can brand a man's soul deeper than any iron. The next morning, Clay rode into town, his black stallion kicking up dust as he stopped in front of the little dress shop. Inside, Ella looked up from her sewing machine, startled by the sound of boots at the door. She was not the kind of woman men noticed round-faced, soft-bodied, with eyes too kind for a world that often forgot kindness. But Clay saw something in her that morning, something he couldn't name. Maybe it was the way she stood tall even when her hands trembled. Maybe it was the quiet strength in her eyes. He tipped his hat and said, "Ma'am, I reckon I need a favor." She smiled politely, her voice gentle as wind over wheat. "What kind of favor, Mr. Maddox?" And just like that, with the air of a man who never meant a word he was saying, Clay asked her to marry him. She blinked, speechless. The townsfolk later said the sewing machine stopped turning that very moment, as if time itself had paused to listen. She said yes, not out of foolishness, but out of a heart that still believed good things could come from unlikely places. The wedding was small but full. The chapel bathed in gold light as Clay stood tall beside his bride. People whispered from the pews, some mocking, some pitying, but Ella walked down that aisle as if she were stepping into heaven itself. She held wildflowers instead of roses, her smile trembling but real. Clay's hand tightened on hers, and for a fleeting moment, something in his chest stuttered. When the preacher said, "You may kiss the bride," he hesitated just a heartbeat too long. And in that heartbeat, he saw her eyes deep, honest, unguarded. It unsettled him. The man who had kissed countless women for fun now found himself afraid to kiss one woman for real. That night, under a moonlit sky and the distant hum of coyotes, he told her she could sleep in the main house. He'd take the guest room. She didn't protest. She simply nodded, whispering, "Good night, Mr. Maddox." He hated how it made him feel like he was the one being judged. Days turned to weeks, and the bet that had seemed so thrilling began to gnaw at him like a bad wound. Ella worked from dawn till dusk mending fences, feeding animals, cooking meals. She was quiet but steady, never asking questions, never demanding affection. But her presence was like sunlight through cracked shutters. It warmed the coldest corners of his ranch. One evening, Clay came home to find her sitting on the porch, her hair loose, singing softly to herself. The sound froze him where he stood. It wasn't the song, it was the peace in her voice, the kind that only came from a heart untouched by bitterness. "You sing good," he muttered. She smiled without looking up. "I sing because I'm grateful," she said. "This land's rough, but it's honest. It doesn't lie to you." That night, for the first time, Clay couldn't sleep. The lie he'd told the marriage made from a cruel dare felt heavier than any saddle he'd ever carried. Weeks later, a storm rolled over Willow Creek, the kind that could tear roofs off and flood pastures in minutes. Ella was out gathering laundry when lightning split the sky, and Clay, without thinking, ran after her. He found her struggling with the sheets, rain drenching her dress, her hair plastered to her cheeks. He grabbed her hand and pulled her under the porch, yelling over the thunder, "You're gonna get yourself killed." She laughed, breathless and wild. "You came for me," she said softly. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. That was the night he realized she wasn't the one being fooled he was. She had turned his shallow game into something sacred, something that stripped him bare. When the rain slowed, he looked at her differently, not as the plain girl he'd married for a joke, but as the woman who'd unknowingly changed him. And for the first time in years, Clay Maddox felt ashamed. The next morning, he rode into town early, his stomach twisting as he passed the saloon. The same men who had started the bet were there, grinning when they saw him. "Well, Maddox," one said, "you win your little wager. Guess she's your wife now." For better or worse, Clay froze, his jaw tightening. He looked at them, then at his reflection in the saloon mirror behind the bar and saw a man he didn't recognize. Without a word, he threw a handful of cash on the table and said, "I didn't win. I lost more than any of you ever could." Then he walked out, leaving laughter and confusion behind him. When he got home, Ella was waiting on the porch, holding a cup of coffee in her hands. "Everything all right?" she asked, her tone steady but knowing. He looked at her for a long time before answering, "Not yet, but it will be if you let me earn what I never deserved." She tilted her head. "And what's that, Mr. Maddox?" His voice broke a little. "You." From that day on, things changed. Clay worked beside her, not above her. He learned her stories about her mother who died young, her dreams of owning her own dress shop, her love of wildflowers because they bloom where no one expects them to. Slowly, laughter found its way into the ranch again. One night, under the stars, Clay took her hand and said, "I married you for a bet, Ella Grace, but somewhere between the lies, I fell for the truth of you." She looked at him, eyes shining with quiet power, and whispered, "Then maybe the bet was worth it. After all, because it brought you home." He kissed her then, not out of guilt or pride, but out of the kind of love that only comes once in a man's life. And from that moment, the ranch, the land, and every piece of Clay Maddox's heart belonged to her. So if you've ever thought love can't grow from broken beginnings, remember this story, because sometimes the ones we underestimate are the ones who heal us the most. Subscribe now for more powerful love and redemption stories that prove even the coldest hearts can change when they meet the right soul.